San Diego State just couldn't keep up. And Utah State ends up completing, the redemption arc, as Jared Calhoun kind of referred it to. Because something I noted on social media, so the numbers were, so in the last 5 games, the Aggies lost to UNLV, Nevada, San Diego State. They did have wins against Grand Canyon, New Mexico. But within those 5 games, they lost to UNLV, Nevada, San Diego State. Even had another loss to UNLV outside of that stretch. And they lost to those teams by a combined 47 points. And on defense, gave up an average of 87 points per game. Those were 3 of their worst games of the season. Granted, Nevada was a 3-point loss. Like, that wasn't the worst thing. But still, defensively weren't on point. And they got blown out by UNLV and San Diego State. In the Mountain West tournament, in facing all 3 of those teams, I mean, we had texters on here who were like, we kind of hope that they face UNLV and then Nevada and San Diego State, because that would be like poetic, and that's what ended up happening.
Yeah.
But in the Mountain West tournaments, the Aggies didn't allow a single one of those teams to score 70 points. I think San Diego State was the high, and Nevada was, and they scored 66, I think.
Yeah. San Diego State scored 62.
Yeah, 62. UNLV scored, I think, exactly 60. So the Aggies allowed an average of 62.7 points. Basically 2 weeks after allowing all 3 of those teams to average 87, none of them below 80. And then they don't allow a single one of those teams to go above 66. And then after losing to those 3 teams by a combined 47, they win by a combined 44. Which is something like a 91 point, whatever 47 plus 44 is. It's a 90-plus point swing against those 3 teams. Like that, if you call anything a redemption tour, that's what that is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Such a difference for Utah State this year compared to last year. I know there were concerns as we got near the end of the season that this team was losing some games. And people are like, oh, it's the hashtag Calhoun collapse again. And I'll be honest, I started to wonder if the same thing was happening. But last year, the team looked like they were out of gas. Teams looked like they had figured some things out against Utah State. This year, yeah, Utah State struggled in some of their games, and they gave up a lot of points in a few of those, as you mentioned. But I never had the sense that the team was really out of gas. But then watching how Coach Calhoun managed his team in this tournament, especially in the early games, he really leaned in on his depth and his versatility. He rotated guys in and out a lot. He didn't just lean on the few guys that he trusted to say, you got to carry us. And then, they eventually would run out of gas and get wore out. That didn't happen. Utah State had fuel in the tank. They played 10 guys in the championship game. And it's not because they had a blowout and they're just, human victory cigars. These were all guys who played minutes and played meaningful minutes. And that was the story for the whole tournament. So I think that speaks to 2 things really for this team and this coaching staff. One, that the coaches trusted their players to give them chances to, if they made a mistake, to still get back in and redeem themselves. That was an issue earlier on, but it seems they've figured that out. But also, it speaks to the players themselves. In listening to and understanding what the coaches are trying to tell them and teach them so that they can gain those coaches' confidence, that they know they can turn to them and have them play meaningful minutes. Gary Clark, through 3 games, that was great. Zach Keller, through 3 games, was great. Because those are some guys that we've seen from time to time. If they're not on, if they're not playing fantastic, they'll get sent to the bench and never see the court again. But they kept getting rotated in. They kept playing games. Tucker Anderson, we didn't see him earlier in the year. We've been seeing him a little bit more lately because he is earning coaches' trust. And so I thought that it was twofold, that the players are working hard in practice, they're performing well on the court, and the coaches are giving them more trust, that they believe in them, that they can do meaningful things when they're on the court, and they're not going to really adversely hurt the team while being on the court. And if they do make a mistake, they figure they've trust them enough to come back out and redeem themselves, or at least not, bring the team down again. And so I was really impressed with how this team and coaches kind of went through this Mountain West Conference tournament with the versatility and depth and really using that as a strength for Utah State.
Yeah, I really love, I think you really hit it on the head there, especially with guys like Gary Clark and Zach Keller, where these are players who can oftentimes end up combining for like 10 minutes of play on the court. And you feel like there are times when they should be getting more. But, against UNLV, Gary Clark, he plays 15 minutes, and they were good minutes, 7 points, 6 rebounds, and, picked up a few fouls, but was effective and was really important when they were trying to deal with some potential matchup issues. They, defending, he was defending with his chest, going toe-to-toe, chest to chest with, some of the talented UNLV players. And he didn't get as much, playing time against Nevada, but that was where Zach Keller stepped up and played 27 minutes. That's where he had one of there was a season high in minutes, and it was dang near a career high. He had one game when he was at Wake Forest where he played 29. But he came out and played a ton of minutes. But then in the championship game, Gary Clark was arguably the Aggies' best big. 11.6 rebounds. Heck, statistically, he was. Because he had as many points as Carson and Zach combined and almost as many rebounds as both of them combined. Actually, it's 9-6, so not that close. But he was plus 13 on the court. When he was on the court, the Aggies were plus 13, and Carson Temple was -1 and Zach Keller was +1. So Gary Clark was the most impactful big in that championship game and had a lot of big moments inside, outside, had, blocks. So
we've seen games where our biggest concerns were if Utah State plays against a team that has talented big players. Grand Canyon, that was a problem. UNLV, that was a problem. San Diego State, that's been a problem. Well, through this tournament, Utah State played some teams that had some size, and they got through that just fine.
Yeah,
because Zach Keller, Gary Clark, Carson Temple, and I think you have to include Tucker Anderson for part of that. But the big guys came through in this tournament. They played great. Because they played solid. They weren't like leading the team in points or leading the team in rebounds necessarily, but they played really solid minutes for Utah State. They were not a liability, and they were unafraid to go up against opponents and their size and their strength and their athleticism, and it wasn't that big of a deficit for Utah State to have those guys out there.
Yeah, like as you said, they weren't really leading the team in scoring that much because I think in the most points that the bigs combined for in any of the 3 games was 18. That's good. That's not a ton. MJ Collins, I think, had 3 games of 8. He had 2 games of more than 18 points by himself. The other game he had 12. So, Adlon Elmin had 1 game where he scored 15. So while scoring was there and they were consistent, because they were getting combined between 15 and 18 points in pretty much every single game, it was, not getting burned so much on the boards. At the start of the San Diego State game, there were some issues because Magoon Guath, I think, had 4 offensive rebounds through about 3/4 of the first half. He ended the game with 5 in 32 minutes. So they walled up and did way better in the second half. And just across all the games, they were not necessarily individually rebounding well, because, again, any one of those individuals topped out at about 6 or 7 rebounds. But it's part of the team rebounding because they box out and the guards will come in and get rebounds. And so the Aggies, they were only out-rebounded by 2 against San Diego State. So pretty much even on the boards there. They out-rebound Nevada by 3. And then, let's see, I think it was, they were slightly out-rebounded by UNLV. So while they didn't dominate the boards in any of the games, they were on par with their opponent in every single game, which is the kind of thing you want. Like, you don't need to win the rebounding battle by 15 to win by 20. You just need to be good on your rebounds. And especially if you shoot the ball really well, you're not going to grab a ton of rebounds because there aren't any offensive rebounds for you to grab, and you just got to grab a few defensive ones. And so that's what the Aggies did. They shot really well throughout most of the tournament, so they didn't have to go get offensive rebounds, and then they were, getting offensive rebound or getting defensive rebounds where they needed to. And so that's where the bigs were commendable. The guards obviously deserve some respect for a lot of times they were going up in the trees to go get those.
Yes.
Mason and Colby, guys like that. And MJ getting some more rebounds. Well, like Drake, I think, had a 9 rebound game in the tournament. So a lot of different ways where the Aggies just went out and were just tougher than they'd been recently, which, I think that was something that I was saying late in the season, is that Utah State's problems weren't so much capability, it was mental. Go out there and be tougher, because they're capable, they're athletic, they can be physical, they've got some size, they don't have elite size and length, they have good size and length, and if they go out there and use it, this is the kind of stuff that happens. And then when they pair that with the offensive talent they had, they go out there and they score 80, 79, and then 73 in the third game in 3 nights. You still manage to put up 73 points on tired legs.
Yeah.
So that was really good from the
Super
Aggies.
impressive the way Utah State this really dialed up their defense, the way that a lot of different guys contributed, spread it around, a lot of different guys got involved. And so I think that really speaks to coaching, but also to the players buying in and being connected and playing their best basketball at the right time.